My name is Melanie Wright. I'm 32, and until 6 months ago, I thought I understood what betrayal meant. Then I had spinal surgery that left me completely immobilized for weeks. While I lay in excruciating pain, unable to even use the bathroom alone, my parents emptied my emergency fund for a luxury Bahamas vacation. They've always been financially dependent on me, but this crossed every boundary imaginable. Trust isn't just broken in an instant. It dies slowly with each lie until one day, there's nothing left to salvage. Before I share how I discovered their betrayal, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to cut toxic family members from your life. I grew up in what appeared to be a typical middle-class neighborhood in Denver. Our house wasn't the biggest on the block, but it was comfortable enough. What my friends didn't see was the financial chaos behind our front door. My father, Harold, had a decent job as a sales manager, but he also had a gambling problem that constantly threatened our stability. My mother, Nancy, worked part-time as a receptionist, but spent most of her energy enabling Dad's behavior and managing the fallout. When I was 7, I remember waking up to my parents screaming at each other in the kitchen. Mom was crying, waving bank statements in Dad's face. "How could you do this again? The mortgage is due next week." Dad just sat there, staring at his coffee mug, mumbling about a sure thing that didn't pan out. This scene became the background noise of my childhood. By the time I was 12, I'd learned to hide my birthday money and babysitting earnings in a hollowed-out book on my shelf. Not because I was saving for something special, but because I knew if I didn't, that money would mysteriously disappear when Dad had one of his financial emergencies. The worst betrayal of my childhood happened when I was 16. I'd been working summers and weekends at a local cafe, saving every penny for college. My parents had started a college fund for me when I was born, at least that's what they told me. I'd never seen statements, but they assured me it was growing steadily. One afternoon, I came home early from my shift because I wasn't feeling well and overheard them in the living room. "Melanie doesn't need to know," my father was saying. "We'll have it back before she ever needs it." "Harold, we used her college fund for a timeshare in Florida 3 years ago," my mother replied. "There's nothing left to put back." I stood in the hallway, my backpack still on my shoulder, feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath me. 3 years. They'd been lying to me for 3 years while I worked double shifts, believing I was supplementing a fund that no longer existed. When I confronted them, the excuses were ready. Dad had been certain the timeshare would be a great investment they could sell for profit. Mom thought it would provide family memories worth more than college tuition. Neither seemed to understand the gravity of what they'd done, stealing their daughter's future. That night changed me. I realized no one was going to secure my future but me. I worked 3 jobs through my senior year of high school, earned a partial scholarship to State University, and took out loans for the rest. During college, the pattern continued. Every few months, there would be an emergency requiring my financial assistance. The roof was leaking. The car broke down. Dad needed dental work not covered by insurance. I was working at the campus library, waiting tables on weekends, and doing freelance graphic design at night, barely sleeping between classes and jobs. Meanwhile, my parents would call with teary voices, promising to pay me back when things turned around. They never did. My junior year, I met Thomas, a business major who became my first serious boyfriend. He came from a family of financial advisors and was shocked by my parents' behavior. "That's financial abuse," he told me one night after I'd sent them my last $200 for the month. "They're taking advantage of you." With Thomas's encouragement, I started establishing boundaries. I opened a new bank account at a different bank. I stopped answering every call immediately. I required receipts before sending money. My parents were furious. How could their own daughter abandon them when they needed help? After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm in Denver. My salary wasn't impressive, but it was stable. Something I'd never experienced growing up. I started building an emergency fund and contributing to my 401k, concepts that were foreign in my childhood home. Meanwhile, the requests from my parents continued, growing more desperate and creative. The pattern reached a breaking point 3 years into my career. I came home from work to find my parents sitting outside my apartment building. They claimed they were being evicted at the end of the week and needed $3,000 to avoid homelessness. Something felt off about the story, so I called their landlord directly, a tactic I'd never tried before. There was no eviction notice. They were behind on rent, but only by 1 month, not the 4 they'd claimed. When I confronted them with this information, Dad became defensive while Mom burst into tears. "We just needed a little help," she sobbed. "Is that so wrong to ask from your daughter who's doing so well?" That moment clarified everything. In their eyes, my success wasn't something to be proud of. It was a resource to be tapped. My financial stability threatened the dynamic they were comfortable with. Them as providers, even if failing ones, me as the dependent child. 2 years later, I accepted a promotion that required relocating to Chicago. The distance changed our relationship. With 600 miles between us, the constant emergencies decreased. We settled into a new pattern of holiday visits and weekly phone calls that mostly avoided financial discussions. I flourished in Chicago. Within 4 years, I was promoted to senior marketing director with a significant salary increase. I bought a condo in a doorman building, started maxing out my retirement contributions, and even began investing. For the first time, I felt financially secure. Then came the company retreat last February. We were doing team-building exercises when I felt a strange pop in my lower back, followed by shooting pain down my right leg. I pushed through the weekend, assuming I'd pulled a muscle, but by Monday, I could barely walk. My doctor ordered an MRI, and the results were concerning enough to refer me to a neurosurgeon. When I called my parents to tell them about my diagnosis, their first question wasn't about my pain level or treatment options. "Is your insurance good?" my mother asked. "Those medical bills can be astronomical." The MRI results were worse than expected. I had 3 severely herniated discs with compression on my spinal cord. The neurosurgeon, Dr. Keller, didn't mince words. "You need a spinal fusion, and you need it soon. This level of compression can cause permanent nerve damage if left untreated." I sat in his office staring at the images on his computer screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My spine, the literal backbone of my body, was falling apart at 32. Dr. Keller explained the procedure in detail, how they would remove the damaged discs, insert titanium hardware, and fuse several vertebrae together. The recovery would be challenging, 6 weeks minimum before returning to work, with the first 2 weeks requiring almost complete bed rest. "You'll need someone to help you," he emphasized, "especially in those first weeks. You won't be able to shower alone, prepare meals, or even get to the bathroom without assistance." That night, I made lists. I contacted HR about short-term disability coverage. I spoke with my landlord about installing temporary grab bars in my bathroom. I calculated expenses and transferred $25,000 from my investments into an emergency fund specifically for my recovery period. I'd always been a planner. Growing up with financial chaos had taught me to prepare for the worst. When I called my parents to update them, they surprised me by immediately offering to come help during my recovery. "We can stay in your guest room," Mom said. "Dad can take time off work. You shouldn't be alone during something like this, honey." Their offer seemed genuinely caring, but a lifetime of experience made me hesitant. I called my best friend Stephanie that evening. "I don't know if it's a good idea," I told her, curled up on my couch with a heating pad against my increasingly painful back. "What if they turn this into another financial drama? I'll be literally helpless." "You don't have many options," Stephanie pointed out. "I'd come in a heartbeat, but I can't take 6 weeks off work. Your parents are retired now, right? Maybe things have changed." She had a point. Dad had retired from sales last year, and Mom hadn't worked in years. They seemed more stable lately, even taking a community college course on budgeting. Maybe they had changed. Maybe I was being unfair, holding their past mistakes against them. Just be careful, Stephanie advised. Set clear boundaries before they arrive. As the surgery date approached, my anxiety grew. Not just about the procedure itself, but about being completely dependent on my parents. The night before they were due to arrive in Chicago, I couldn't sleep. I paced my condo, checking and rechecking that everything was prepared, medications pre-ordered, fridge stocked, recovery supplies purchased. When they arrived, they seemed like different people than the parents I'd grown up with. Dad carried my groceries without complaint. Mom organized my medications by day and time. They listened attentively to my pre-surgery instructions and took notes during my final consultation with Dr. Keller. The morning of surgery, as the nurse was preparing my father took my hand. "We won't let you down this time, Melanie," he said with unusual solemnity. "We know we haven't always been there for you, but we're going to make it up to you now." I wanted desperately to believe him. Before being wheeled into the operating room, I had one final conversation with them about finances. "There's an envelope in my desk drawer with my insurance card, some cash for incidentals, and the debit card for my recovery fund," I explained. "The PIN is my birth date. Only use it for my medical expenses and necessities, okay? Everything else should be covered by my disability insurance." "Don't worry about money now," my mother said, smoothing my hair back. "Just focus on getting better." I woke up from surgery to discover things had gone worse than expected. The damage was more extensive than the MRI had shown. Dr. Keller had needed to fuse an additional vertebra, and there was some nerve damage during the procedure. The pain was excruciating, beyond anything I could have imagined. "Recovery will be longer than we initially discussed," Dr. Keller told me during rounds the day after surgery. "I'm looking at a minimum of 10 weeks before you can return to even part-time work. The first month will be extremely limited mobility." I cried that night after my parents left for my condo. Not just from the pain, but from the realization of how completely dependent I would be. I'd spent my adult life building independence, and now it was gone in an instant. When I was discharged 3 days later, my parents seemed prepared for the challenge. Dad had rearranged my furniture to accommodate a hospital bed in the living room. Mom had prepared meals and frozen them in single portions. They helped me to the bathroom, managed my medications, and responded to my every need. "See?" Dad said on the 5th day. "We're not the same people who let you down before. We've changed." That first week was a blur of pain medication, fitful sleep, and humiliating dependence. I couldn't even go to the bathroom without help. I couldn't shower, couldn't dress myself, couldn't prepare food. The pain was constant and debilitating. On my darkest days, I wondered if I would ever feel normal again. My parents seemed attentive, but I began noticing strange patterns. They would both leave for errands that seemed to take hours. When I asked what had taken so long, their answers were vague. "Traffic," Dad would say. "Lines at the pharmacy," Mom would add. Sometimes they'd come back without whatever they had supposedly gone out to get. By the beginning of the second week, I was lucid enough between pain medications to notice other concerning behaviors. They seemed to be checking my mail before bringing it to me. I caught Mom scrolling through my phone once while she thought I was asleep. And their hushed conversations would abruptly stop whenever I wheeled into a room. As the second week of my recovery progressed, my parents' behavior became increasingly suspicious. I would catch them having whispered conversations that would stop abruptly when I entered the room. Dad spent hours on my laptop, closing it quickly whenever I asked what he was doing. "Just checking baseball scores," he'd say, though I could have sworn I glimpsed my bank's website. One afternoon, while Mom was helping me back to bed after a painful physical therapy session, Dad approached with an overly casual expression. "Honey, we need to pay some of your medical bills that came in. Do you have your banking password somewhere? It would be easier if we could just handle it directly." Even through my medication haze, alarm bells rang in my mind. "The insurance should be handling most of it automatically," I said. Any copays can be paid with the debit card I showed you. Yes, but some providers want payment upfront before they bill insurance, he insisted. It would really be simpler if we had access to your accounts. Mom jumped in, her voice soothing. Melanie, you're in no condition to be worrying about finances. Let us handle this for you. We're trying to help. I was in excruciating pain that day. My physical therapist had pushed me harder than usual, and all I wanted was to take my medication and sleep. Fighting seemed impossible. Against my better judgment, I gave them limited access to one checking account where I kept bill-paying money. Only use it for my medical expenses, I emphasized. Nothing else. Of course, sweetheart, Mom said, patting my hand. We just want to make things easier for you. After that day, their behavior shifted subtly. They spent less time attending to my needs and more time on errands. My water glass would remain empty for hours. My medication would be late. When I asked for help to the bathroom, they would seem annoyed by the interruption. My friend Stephanie texted asking if she could visit that weekend. When I mentioned it to my parents, they immediately discouraged it. You're not strong enough for visitors, Mom insisted. The doctor said you need rest. Dr. Keller actually encouraged having friends visit, I countered, remembering his specific advice about preventing depression during recovery. Well, this weekend isn't good, Dad said firmly. We have some appointments we can't reschedule. I was beginning to feel isolated and increasingly dependent on two people who seemed less interested in my care each day. Basic supplies began running low, my prescription pain medication, food in the refrigerator, even toilet paper. When I mentioned this, Dad would look surprised. I just went shopping 2 days ago, he'd say, though the evidence of my empty refrigerator contradicted him. One evening during the 3rd week, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. She's not going to notice, my father was saying in a hushed voice. She can barely get to the bathroom by herself. Harold, I don't know about this, my mother replied. What if she checks? Since when does she check her investment accounts daily? By the time she's back on her feet, we'll have figured something out. I felt sick, and not from my surgery. Were they planning to access my investment accounts now? I'd given them limited access to one checking account, not permission to raid my entire financial life. The next morning, my mother sat on the edge of my bed with an unusually serious expression. Melanie, honey, we've run into some unexpected expenses with your care. My guard immediately went up. What expenses? The insurance should be covering most of it. Well, yes, but there are many things insurance doesn't cover. Special foods, medical supplies, transportation costs. She paused, looking uncomfortable. Dad and I have been covering these things ourselves, but we're running a bit short. The debit card I gave you has plenty of money on it, I said. Has it been declined? No, it's working fine, she said quickly. But we were wondering about that emergency fund you mentioned before your surgery. You said you set aside $25,000, right? We might need to access about $10,000 of that for some special medical equipment the doctor recommended. What equipment? I asked. Dr. Keller hasn't mentioned anything to me. It's a specialized recovery chair, Dad interjected, appearing in the doorway. Helps with circulation and prevents bed sores. Insurance considers it a luxury item, but we think you need it. I was groggy from my morning medication and in considerable pain. Fighting seemed impossible, and if there was equipment that could help my recovery, I wanted it. Despite the uneasiness in my stomach, I provided them with the information to access my emergency fund account. Only $10,000, I emphasized. And I want to see the brochure for this chair. Of course, Mom said, squeezing my hand. We'll bring it home when we go to order it. 2 days later, they dropped a bombshell. We need to head back to Denver for a few days, Dad announced over breakfast. Your Uncle Steve is having some health issues, and we need to help out. Uncle Steve? I barely remembered meeting him twice in my life. Since when were my parents close enough to him to drop everything and rush to his aid? But who will help me here? I asked, panic rising. I still couldn't shower alone or prepare meals. "We've arranged for a home health aide," Mom assured me. "She'll come morning and evening to help with the essentials. We shouldn't be gone more than 5 days." Before I could ask more questions, Dad added, "We've put her contact information on the fridge, and we've paid her in advance using your card. Don't worry about a thing." They left that afternoon in a flurry of activity, promising to call when they arrived at Uncle Steve's. But that call never came. When I tried reaching them that evening, both their phones went straight to voicemail. I tried again the next morning with the same result. "We must have forgotten our chargers," Mom texted later that day. "Reception at Steve's is terrible anyway. The nurse should be there soon. Love you." Something felt very wrong, but I was trapped in my body, dependent on the nurse who did indeed show up, but only for 1 hour in the morning and 1 in the evening, barely enough time to help me with the bathroom and a quick sponge bath. The rest of the time, I was alone, struggling to reach water or food, unable to get my medication that sat just a few feet away when the timer went off. On the 3rd day of my parents' absence, I heard a key in the door. For a moment, I felt relief they had returned early. Instead, Stephanie walked in, arms full of grocery bags. "Surprise," she called, then stopped short when she saw me. I can only imagine how I looked, unwashed, in the same clothes for 3 days, surrounded by empty water glasses I couldn't refill. "Melanie, what the hell?" she gasped, dropping the bags and rushing to my side. "Where are your parents?" "The nurse downstairs said they left days ago." Through tears of relief and shame, I explained their sudden departure for Uncle Steve's supposed health crisis. Stephanie's expression darkened as she helped me to the bathroom, then brought fresh water and my overdue medication. "Something's not right," she said, opening my refrigerator to find it nearly empty. "They left you like this?" "With barely any care." As Stephanie unpacked the groceries she'd brought, she pulled out her phone. "I saw something weird this morning. Let me show you." She handed me her phone, open to Instagram. There, posted just 4 hours earlier, was a photo of my parents. They weren't at Uncle Steve's bedside. They were on a pristine beach, toasting with champagne flutes, wearing new swimwear I'd never seen. The location tag read Grand Bahama Luxury Resort and Spa. The caption twisted the knife. "Thanks to our wonderful daughter for making this dream vacation possible. 25 years of marriage deserves a proper celebration. #blessed #luxury travel." I felt physically ill, the betrayal so complete it manifested as nausea. With shaking hands, I asked Stephanie to bring me my laptop. I logged into my bank accounts to find my emergency fund nearly depleted. Over 3 days, there had been withdrawals totaling $18,000, far more than the $10,000 they'd requested for the non-existent specialized recovery chair. "Check their room," I whispered to Stephanie. "See if they left anything behind." In the guest room, Stephanie found printouts of booking confirmations, a 10-day all-inclusive stay at the Grand Bahama Luxury Resort, first-class airfare, spa packages, and a private sunset cruise. The total came to just over $16,000. The dates showed they had booked this trip 2 weeks before my surgery, not as a sudden decision, but as a planned extraction of my money while I would be at my most vulnerable. There was more. Email confirmations showed they had scheduled this celebration months ago, putting down deposits using my credit card information. They had been planning this betrayal while looking me in the eye, promising to take care of me when I needed them most. I broke down completely, my body shaking with sobs that sent fresh waves of pain through my surgically repaired spine. Stephanie held me as carefully as she could, her own tears falling into my unwashed hair. I trusted them, I kept repeating. How could they do this? I tried calling them again. Straight to voicemail. I sent text messages that showed as delivered but remained unanswered. Finally, my mother responded with a single text. "Signal spotty at Steve's farm. All okay here. Nurse taking good care of you." The lie was so blatant, so callous that it triggered a physical reaction. My heart raced, my vision blurred, and the pain in my back intensified to unbearable levels. Stephanie, alarmed by my condition, called Dr. Keller, who sent a colleague to check on me immediately. The doctor who arrived, Dr. Patel, was concerned by my vital signs. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high," she said after examining me. "This level of stress could seriously compromise your recovery. The fusion needs time to stabilize, and physical stress can interfere with that process." She adjusted my medication and strongly recommended I find a way to reduce the emotional distress. As if I could simply switch off the knowledge that my parents had abandoned me in a helpless state to sip cocktails on a beach with my money. After Dr. Patel left, Stephanie took charge. She called her boyfriend, James, who arrived with his brother, both loading my parents' belongings into garbage bags. Stephanie contacted a locksmith to change my locks while I called my bank to freeze all remaining accounts. We discovered my parents had tried to access my investment accounts as well, but thankfully had been thwarted by the two-factor authentication. "We need to get a lawyer," Stephanie said, her voice firm. "This is elder abuse, except you're not elderly. But it's the same concept, financial exploitation of a temporarily disabled person." I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to speak. In the space of a few hours, I'd lost my parents for the second time in my life. The first when I discovered they'd stolen my college fund, and now when they'd abandoned me at my most vulnerable to steal again. That night, Stephanie stayed with me, sleeping on the couch beside my hospital bed in the living room. For the first time since surgery, I felt safe enough to truly rest, knowing someone who genuinely cared for me was watching over me. My parents returned exactly 1 week after they'd left, walking into my condo using their key. The locksmith had been delayed due to COVID restrictions. They froze when they saw Stephanie sitting on my couch and me in my wheelchair, staring at them with an expression that must have communicated everything. They looked tanned and relaxed, carrying gift shop bags and wearing new clothes. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my father attempted a casual smile. "We're back. Steve is doing much better now." "Who let you in, Stephanie?" "Drop the act," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "We know where you really were." Mom's face flickered with uncertainty before she composed herself. "What are you talking about?" "We were at Steve's, like we told you." Stephanie silently handed them her phone, open to their own Instagram post. The color drained from my mother's face while my father's turned an alarming shade of red. "You went through our things," he blustered, attempting to turn the tables. "Invaded our privacy?" "You stole $18,000 from me," I replied, "while I lay here unable to even get to the bathroom by myself. You left me alone with inadequate care so you could drink champagne on a beach." "Now, Melanie," my mother began in her soothing voice, "there's been a misunderstanding. We were going to pay it back." "When?" I demanded. "How? With what money?" "We deserved a break," my father suddenly exploded. "Do you have any idea how stressful it is taking care of someone after surgery? Listening to you moan in pain, having to help you shower? We needed to recharge." I stared at him, stunned by the justification. "So you stole from me? Your daughter who was lying helpless after major surgery." "It's not stealing," my mother interjected. "Families help each other. After all we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked quietly. "Stolen my college fund? Constantly asked for loans you never repaid? Left me alone when I couldn't even reach my medication. We raised you," my father shouted. "Put a roof over your head. Everything you have now, your education, your job, this fancy condo, it all started with us. So yes, we took a vacation with money that is partially ours by right." The entitlement in his voice was staggering. In their worldview, my success belonged to them. My money was an extension of their parental rights. My vulnerability was an inconvenience that justified abandonment. "The nurse we hired was perfectly adequate," my mother added defensively. "It's not like we left you completely alone. She came for 2 hours a day," Stephanie interjected. I found Melanie unable to reach water or food. She hadn't been properly bathed in days. Her medication schedule was completely disrupted. That's not our fault, Dad insisted. We paid for what we thought was full-time care. With my credit card, I said. And you only paid for 10 hours a week, not the full-time care you're claiming. I have the receipts. As the confrontation escalated, more truths emerged. They had told the doorman they were leaving because I had other family coming to stay. They had redirected my medication delivery to be rescheduled for after their return. They had even called my physical therapist to cancel sessions, claiming I was too tired to participate. You jeopardized my recovery, I said, my voice breaking. The doctor had to come because my blood pressure was dangerously high from the stress of discovering what you'd done. You're being dramatic, my father dismissed. Your back is going to heal just fine. No thanks to you, Stephanie muttered. My mother's face suddenly crumpled into the tears I'd seen her use countless times to deflect accountability. We made a mistake, but we're still your parents. You can't just throw away family over money. This isn't about money, I said. It's about trust. It's about care. It's about not abandoning your daughter when she's completely dependent on you. My father's expression hardened. So what now? Are you going to punish us over one mistake? One mistake? I echoed incredulously. This is a lifetime pattern. And yes, there will be consequences. Fine, he snapped. If you can't forgive your own parents, then we'll just leave. See how well you manage without us. My mother looked alarmed. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected from their victim. In her script, I was supposed to forgive, to understand, to maintain this cycle of exploitation. If you walk out that door, I said quietly, don't expect to be welcome back. Not in my home, not in my life, not anywhere near my finances. For a moment, I saw uncertainty cross my father's face. Then his pride took over. Let's go, Nancy. Our ungrateful daughter has made her choice. My mother hesitated, genuine fear in her eyes for perhaps the first time. Melanie, please. We're sorry. We'll make it right. No, I said, the decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. You won't. You never have, and you never will. Please leave my keys on the table on your way out. In that moment, I chose myself. I chose my health, my future, and my peace over the toxic pattern I'd endured my entire life. As they walked out, my father's shoulders rigid with indignation and my mother's shaking with tears, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. Stephanie squeezed my hand. You did the right thing. I know, I said, tears streaming down my face. I just wish they had been the parents I deserved. The moment my parents walked out the door, I knew my life had fundamentally changed. There was no going back to our previous relationship, not after what they'd done. With Stephanie's help, I began systematically cutting all ties that could allow them to harm me again. First came the financial separation. I spent hours on the phone with my bank, closing accounts and opening new ones at a different institution. I changed every password, security question, and contact number. I froze my credit to prevent them from opening accounts in my name, something I discovered they had attempted during their caretaking when collection calls began coming in for credit cards I'd never applied for. They actually tried to open 3 cards in your name, the fraud department representative told me. Fortunately, the verification calls came to your cell phone, which they apparently didn't have access to when they applied. The depth of their betrayal was still unfolding. Each day seemed to bring a new discovery of how thoroughly they had planned to exploit my vulnerability. Stephanie stayed with me for 2 weeks, sleeping on my couch and coordinating with her boyfriend to bring supplies. Together, we created a support schedule with several friends taking shifts to ensure I was never alone and helpless again. The contrast between their genuine care and my parents' abandonment only highlighted how abnormal my family dynamic had been. The first call came 3 days after the confrontation. My mother, crying so hard I could barely understand her. Please, Melanie. We made a terrible mistake. We know that now. Your father is too proud to say it, but we need you. Need me or need my money? I asked, my voice steady. That's not fair, she sobbed. We're your parents. Doesn't that count for anything? It counted for everything, I replied. That's why your betrayal hurt so much. After that came the barrage calls, texts, emails. When I blocked their numbers, they created new email addresses. When I filtered those to spam, they sent handwritten letters. The tone oscillated wildly between contrition and accusation. We deserve to be part of your life. After all we sacrificed for you. We made one mistake. You're being cruel and unforgiving. I read each message with increasing emotional distance, recognizing the manipulation tactics I'd been subjected to my entire life. Dr. Patel had referred me to a therapist specializing in recovery from familial financial abuse, and our sessions were revealing patterns I'd normalized since childhood. A week after changing my locks, I heard from my grandmother, my father's mother whom I'd always been close to. Her trembling voice nearly broke my resolve. Melanie, sweetheart, your parents told me you've cut them off completely. They're devastated. Whatever happened, surely it can be worked out. Family is family. I took a deep breath. Grandma, did they tell you why I cut contact? They said you were angry about some misunderstanding with money while you were recovering. But honey, people make mistakes. I detailed exactly what had happened, the theft, the abandonment, the lies. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long I thought she'd hung up. Grandma? I'm here, she said finally, her voice different. I had no idea. They told us a completely different story. Another family member entered the picture unexpectedly, my brother Ryan, 5 years younger than me and living in Seattle. We'd never been particularly close, in part because I'd left for college when he was entering adolescence. He'd always been more favored by our parents, less expected to contribute financially, more protected from their schemes. Mom and Dad said you've lost your mind, he said bluntly when he called. They said the pain medication after your surgery made you paranoid, and you accused them of stealing when they were just trying to help. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. Did they mention their luxury vacation while I was unable to get out of bed? What vacation? They said they were taking care of you 24/7 and you snapped at them. I directed him to their own social media posts, still visible because they hadn't considered that evidence of their betrayal was publicly available. His shocked silence was followed by a string of profanity. Jesus, Mel. I had no idea. They're telling everyone you're mentally unstable. Ryan became an unexpected ally, confirming that our parents had been asking him for money too, claiming medical expenses related to my care. He'd sent them $1,200, money I never saw a penny of. The most disturbing confrontation came 3 weeks after I'd cut contact. My physical therapy was progressing well. I could now walk short distances with a walker. I was in the kitchen making tea when my doorman called up. Ms. Wright, your parents are here insisting on coming up. They say it's an emergency. Do not let them up, I said firmly. I do not want to see them. 20 minutes later, the doorman called again. They won't leave, Ms. Wright. They're causing a scene in the lobby. Should I call the police? Yes, I said, my heart racing but my resolve firm. And tell them I have documentation of financial exploitation. The police arrived and took statements. My parents presented themselves as concerned about their daughter who had become confused after surgery. The officers, to their credit, asked to speak with me privately. I showed them bank statements, their social media posts, and the fraudulent credit applications. No charges were filed that day, but the officers strongly advised my parents to leave and not return. That evening, I called the lawyer Stephanie had recommended. I need to make this official, I told her. I need legal protection from my own parents. The lawyer, Catherine Jensen, specialized in financial abuse cases. She sent a formal demand letter for repayment of the stolen funds and a cease and desist, ordering no contact. When my parents received it, they escalated their campaign to other channels. My mother created posts on Facebook claiming I had abandoned them in their time of need, tagging mutual friends and extended family. Pray for our daughter who has turned against her family. Mental health issues can affect anyone. The comments were filled with sympathy for them and condemnation for me. People I'd known my entire life accepted their narrative without question. Only Ryan and a few close friends who knew the truth defended me. The isolation was painful, but less painful than continuing the cycle of abuse. Each night, as I struggled through physical therapy exercises, I reminded myself that I was rebuilding more than just my physical strength. I was reconstructing my entire understanding of family and obligation. The hardest part of recovery from familial financial abuse, my therapist explained, is the guilt. We're conditioned to believe that family loyalty trumps personal boundaries. But healthy love doesn't exploit vulnerability. 6 weeks into my recovery, Ryan called with news. "I found out they did this to Uncle Steve too," he said. "Remember when he had that heart surgery 5 years ago? They offered to help and ended up draining his retirement account. The family covered it up because they didn't want a scandal. The pattern extended beyond me, beyond even our immediate family. My parents were serial financial predators who targeted the vulnerable. The realization cemented my decision to keep them permanently out of my life." 2 months after surgery, I was well enough to return to limited work from home. The emotional healing was slower than the physical, but I was making progress on both fronts. I had started building a new support network, one based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. "You're not just recovering from surgery," Stephanie observed one evening as we shared dinner in my now accessible condo. "You're recovering from your entire childhood." She was right. And like my spine with its new hardware and fused vertebrae, I was becoming stronger at the broken places. Physical therapy became the rhythm by which I measured progress, both in my body and my life. Each session pushed me to my limits, left me exhausted but incrementally stronger. My therapist, Daniel, had a mantra he repeated whenever I wanted to give up. "Healing isn't linear, but it is possible." I applied this wisdom to both my spine and my heart. Some days the pain, physical and emotional, felt overwhelming. On others, I could see how far I'd come. 3 months after surgery, I was walking unassisted for short distances. For months in, I could manage a full workday from home. By the 6-month mark, I was cleared to return to the office part-time. My condo, with its memories of betrayal and painful recovery, no longer felt like home. With my doctor's approval, I began looking for a ground-floor apartment with better accessibility. The search became a metaphor for my fresh start, a space untainted by my parents' betrayal, designed around my new needs and priorities. I found a beautiful garden apartment in a quieter neighborhood. The building had no stairs, wide doorways that could accommodate mobility aids if needed, and a small private patio where I could sit outside during my recovery. Moving was physically challenging, but emotionally liberating. Throughout this transition, I discovered who my real support system was. Stephanie remained my rock, helping coordinate the move and checking in daily. My brother Ryan, despite our previously distant relationship, flew in from Seattle to help with the heavy lifting my friends couldn't manage. Coworkers organized meal deliveries during my first week in the new place. "This is what family really looks like," Ryan observed one evening as we sat with Stephanie and James, boxes still half unpacked around us. "People who show up, not people who take advantage." His perspective had shifted dramatically since discovering our parents' true nature. He shared stories from his own experience. Financial emergencies they'd invented, guilt trips when he couldn't help, subtle manipulations he'd never recognized until seeing them from the outside. "I was their golden child because I never questioned them," he admitted. But that was changing even before all this happened. Last Christmas, Dad asked for money for a medical procedure, but showed up with a new golf club set 2 weeks later. The financial aftermath of my parents' theft required professional intervention. I hired a financial advisor who specialized in fraud recovery. Sandra helped me rebuild my emergency fund, strengthen security on all accounts, and create a sustainable long-term plan. Financial abuse leaves scars just like physical abuse, Sandra explained during our first meeting. Part of recovery is learning to trust yourself with money again. She was right. I found myself hesitating before any purchase, questioning whether I deserved to spend on myself, fearful of depleting resources I might need if abandoned again. The hypervigilance was exhausting but gradually eased as I established new financial safety measures. My parents' attempts at contact became less frequent but more desperate as they realized I wasn't going to relent. Around the 6-month mark, they sent a letter that stood out from their previous communications. "We've been seeing a counselor," my mother wrote. "We're beginning to understand how our behavior has hurt you. We don't expect forgiveness, but we want you to know we're trying to change." It wasn't exactly an apology. There was no explicit acknowledgement of what they'd done, no offer of restitution, no request for reconciliation. Just a vague gesture towards self-improvement that might or might not be genuine. I showed the letter to my therapist, Dr. Martinez, during our weekly session. "What do you want to do with this?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to believe they're capable of change. Another part thinks this is just a new tactic to regain access." Both could be true, she pointed out. They might genuinely want to change and still pose a risk to your well-being. The question is, what boundaries do you need regardless of their intentions? I thought carefully about those boundaries. If there was ever to be any relationship with my parents again, I needed clear, non-negotiable conditions, complete transparency about what they had done, full repayment of stolen funds, ongoing therapy, and respect for my autonomy, financial and otherwise. I conveyed these conditions in a brief, formal response through my lawyer. Their reaction would tell me everything I needed to know about their sincerity. The 1-year anniversary of my surgery arrived on a crisp autumn day. I celebrated with a small gathering of my chosen family. Stephanie and James, Ryan who'd flown in for the occasion, colleagues who'd become friends, neighbors who'd checked on me during recovery. We sat on my patio, raising glasses to what several guests called my spine-iversary. To Melanie, Stephanie toasted, who discovered her backbone in more ways than one. Everyone laughed, including me. The joke would have been impossible 6 months earlier, when the wound was still too raw. Now I could see humor in the parallel between my physical and emotional journeys. That evening, after everyone had left, I received an unexpected call from my grandmother. "Your parents attended a family intervention today," she said without preamble. "Your Uncle Steve organized it after learning what they did to you." Several family members confronted them about their pattern of financial exploitation. My heart raced. How did they respond? "Your father walked out initially," she sighed. "But your mother stayed. And remarkably, your father came back an hour later. They've agreed to a family-supervised financial rehabilitation program. No access to anyone else's money, complete transparency, regular counseling." It wasn't forgiveness, and it certainly wasn't reconciliation, but it was the first acknowledgement from the wider family that the problem was real and required intervention. I felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I was still carrying, the burden of being the only one willing to name the abuse. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from my parents. Unlike previous communications, this one contained a specific accounting of what they had taken, an acknowledgement of the harm caused, and a repayment plan they'd developed with their counselor. There was no request to resume contact, just a statement of accountability. I read the letter several times, noting what was present and what was missing. Present was responsibility. Missing was the manipulation and guilt that had characterized all their previous attempts at communication. It wasn't everything, but it was something real. After consulting with Dr. Martinez, I decided to allow very limited contact, monthly email updates, no financial discussions, no in-person meetings yet. It was a small opening, heavily fortified with boundaries. My return to full-time work marked another milestone in recovery. My colleagues welcomed me back with a celebration that brought me to tears. My boss had held my position, accommodated my needs, and never made me feel that my health crisis had diminished my value to the company. As my professional life stabilized, I began thinking about how my experience might help others. With Dr. Martinez's encouragement, I started a support group for survivors of family financial abuse. Our first meeting had just 3 participants. Within 6 months, we had grown to 15 regular members, each with stories that echoed aspects of my own. I never had a name for what my family did to me, one woman shared during a meeting. I just thought I was being selfish for not wanting to support my adult son who keeps borrowing money for emergencies that never seem to end. Giving others the framework to understand their experiences helped me process my own. Each story validated that I wasn't alone, that my boundaries weren't unreasonable, that healthy families don't exploit vulnerability. Ryan and I developed a closer relationship than we'd ever had growing up. During one of his visits, we had a conversation that crystallized how far we'd both come. "Do you ever worry we'll turn out like them?" he asked as we walked along the lakefront. "That it's somehow in our DNA to be financially toxic?" "Every day," I admitted. "But then I remember we've both made different choices. You returned that loan Dad asked for last year, even though it meant postponing your vacation. I've never asked anyone to jeopardize their financial security for my benefit." "We're breaking the pattern," he said, nodding. "It stops with us." Nearly 2 years after surgery, my life had transformed in ways I never anticipated when I first felt that pop in my back during a company retreat. My spine had healed stronger than before. My finances had recovered and were more secure than ever. My relationships were fewer but deeper, built on mutual respect rather than obligation or exploitation. Most importantly, I had rewritten my understanding of family. Blood might determine biology, but actions determine relationships. Real family, chosen or born, respects boundaries, shows up during crises, and builds you up rather than depleting you. The last time I spoke with my father, during a carefully structured phone call supervised by his therapist, he asked a question that would have once devastated me: "Will you ever fully forgive us?" I considered my answer carefully. "I've forgiven you enough to wish you well, to hope you heal, to want better for you than what you chose. But I'll never forget what happened, and I'll never again put myself in a position where you could repeat it." It wasn't the answer he wanted, but it was the truth. And after a lifetime of accommodating others at my own expense, speaking my truth without apology was perhaps the most profound healing of all. If you've ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. How did you navigate the guilt and external pressure? What helped you stay firm in your decision? Your experiences might help someone else currently struggling with similar choices. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect yourself from those who should have protected you. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, real love builds up, it never tears down.